Arriving late again, Isabelle Beaumont's cutting voice sliced through the hallway before Claire could even put down her bag. The woman appeared in the kitchen doorway, elegant even at 7 a.m., grey hair perfectly set and a silk robe worth more than Claire's monthly pay. "Good morning, Mrs. Beaumont. I arrived on time. On time. You were supposed to be here at 6:30 since last week." Claire took a deep breath. She knew arguing never helped. Isabelle always found a reason to complain. 2 months working in that mansion, and every day was the same. "I'm sorry. It won't happen again." "Of course it won't, because if it does, you're out of here today." Isabelle's eyes were cold as ice. "Have you cleaned Alexander's office?" "I'll do it now. And the living room and the bathrooms on the second floor." "Everything will be done, Mrs. Beaumont." "I hope so, because this filthy girl they hired isn't fit to polish this family's shoes." Claire lowered her head and bit her lip. 2 tears wanted to break free, but she held them back. She wouldn't give that woman the satisfaction. Claire Moore was 26 and still slept in a bunk at a boarding house. Daughter of French immigrants, she grew up poor but dignified. Her grandmother Margaret was at the county hospital, and Claire worked 12 hours a day to pay for the medications Medicaid didn't cover. Isabelle walked away with a cruel smile, heels echoing on marble. Claire picked up the bucket and cleaning supplies. The Beaumont mansion was majestic, 3 floors of marble, glass, and dreams she'd never touch. Magazine-worthy gardens, cars that cost more than a whole house. And there in that palace she was invisible. Every day she rode the bus an hour and a half from the boarding house to the upscale neighborhood. Every day she heard the humiliations. Every day she returned home with her heart tight. But she had her grandmother to care for, and that made it worth it. As she climbed the stairs carrying the bucket, Claire remembered Margaret's words during the last visit. "Sometimes God places us in hard places for a reason." Keep your eyes open. She studied French from an old book her grandmother had given her. The yellowed pages didn't lessen the value of those words that connected her to her roots. Every day on the bus, she whispered, "Bonjour, Grandma," like a prayer. It was her way to remember she had a story, that she wasn't just a cleaning girl, but as she reached the second floor, she heard something that made her stop in the middle of the hallway. A man's voice, speaking French and crying. Claire stood still, gripping the bucket. The voice came from the second-floor office. It was Alexander Beaumont, the eldest son, and he was shattered. Claire could understand every word leaving Alexander's mouth. He was on the phone with someone in French, and the pain in his voice cut through the heart. "Grand-mère, please, I miss him so much. I don't know what to do. I miss him so much." Claire should have gone downstairs, pretended she heard nothing, kept being invisible as always. But the French words learned there, the memories of conversations with Grandma Margaret, the stories about France, the homesickness that ached in her chest. They pulled her closer. "I know he wanted me to take control of the company, but I feel so lost," Alexander continued. 14 days, 2 weeks since he died, and it still feels like a nightmare." Claire closed her eyes. She knew that pain, the feeling of carrying a weight bigger than your own shoulders. Since her grandmother fell ill, she felt the same emptiness. "How can I run all this when I can't even sleep?" He kept going, mixing French with English. "The signing is in 4 days. Everyone expects me to be as strong as he was. But I'm not him. I'm not Dad." The word Dad slipped out in English, tangled with French, and Claire's heart tightened. Even rich, even powerful, Alexander was just a son grieving his father. "Thomas keeps saying I should sign everything fast, that I can't show weakness. But how do you not show weakness when you're broken inside?" Claire reached the top of the stairs and saw the office door ajar. Alexander stood with his back to her, staring out the window, phone to his ear. He wore a wrinkled white shirt, and his hair was messy. Nothing like the man she saw in business magazines. "I must be strong to honor his memory," he whispered. He turned a little, and Claire saw his face up close for the first time. His eyes were red, his beard unshaven, and a deep sadness etched his features. A broken man, rich, powerful, but completely broken. "Je t'aime, grand-mère," he murmured. He hung up and stood there, staring at the phone. Claire slipped away silently, went down a few steps, and waited. Then she climbed again, this time letting the bucket clatter so he'd know someone was around. When she passed the office door, Alexander sat in the chair, shuffling papers. He didn't even look up. She moved on to the bedrooms, but she couldn't shake the image. A powerful man crying in French, feeling the same pain she knew so well. From the hallway she heard firm footsteps on the stairs. It was Thomas Beaumont. The way he looked toward his brother's door made Claire feel something was off. The smile on his face didn't match the family's grief. Claire was cleaning the second-floor bathroom when the shrill voice of Camille Sanders echoed along the corridor. Alexander's fiancée had arrived with her friends for what she called a wedding planning meeting. "My God, that cleaning product smell," Camille complained loudly. "Where is that maid?" "She can't use this awful stuff when I'm here." Claire sighed and stepped out with the supplies. "Sorry, Miss Camille. I can clean elsewhere." Camille stopped and looked her up and down like she was inspecting a broken object. She was beautiful, Claire admitted, blonde hair perfectly blown out, designer clothes, manicured nails, everything money could buy. "You," Camille said, pointing at Claire. "What's your name again?" "Claire, miss." "Right." Camille turned to her friends. "Girls, look. This is the cleaner I told you about, the one who can't even serve coffee properly." The three friends laughed. Claire felt her face heat. "Camille, leave the girl alone," one friend said without conviction. "Why? She works here, doesn't she?" Camille grabbed a glass of juice from the table and deliberately spilled it on the marble floor. "Oops, what a shame. Clean that up." Claire looked at the orange liquid spreading across the white floor, took a breath and knelt to clean. "You know what's funny?" Camille kept amusing herself. "You people are born to serve, and we're born to be served. That's how the world works." Claire scrubbed without replying. Tears pushed forward, but she refused to give Camille the pleasure. "When I marry Alexander," Camille said louder, making sure Claire heard every word, "I'll have all of this. The mansion, the cars, the jewelry. I'll be the lady of this house." One friend whispered, "But Camille, you haven't even set a date yet." "And with his father's death—" "So what?" Camille laughed. "He's inheriting billions." "Billions. Imagine my life. Trips to Paris, clothes, parties." She looked down at Claire. "While she'll still be here scrubbing the floors I walk on." Claire finished and stood. Camille was so close Claire could smell the expensive perfume. "One question, Claire," Camille said softly, just for her. "Did you cry when Alexander's father died?" Claire frowned. "He was very private, miss, always traveling." "Interesting, because I didn't cry either." Camille smiled coldly. "You know why? Because now Alexander will be even richer. His death was the best thing that could have happened." A chill ran through Claire. What kind of person said something like that? Camille left laughing with her friends, and Claire stood with the bucket in her hand and a strange feeling in her chest. Something was very wrong in that house. Thomas Beaumont was the kind of man who changed the air when he entered a room. At 32, he had his older brother's looks, but his eyes lacked something, a flatness that made Claire uneasy whenever he was near. She was organizing the library when she heard him on the phone in the next office. The wall was thin, voices carried easily. "Attorney Matthews, I need a legal question answered." Thomas's voice was low, but Claire could hear. She kept working, trying not to listen, but the next words made her freeze. "Let's say for some reason my brother can't be present for the document signing. Is there an automatic succession protocol in that case?" Claire's heart sped up. Why would Thomas ask that? "I see," Thomas continued. "As second in line, I'd automatically assume control." "Interesting." She crouched, pretending to pick something off the floor, trying to hear better. No. It's just a question. Alexander is fine, thank God. But you know how life is. You never know. Better to be prepared, right?" Thomas chuckled softly, but it wasn't a warm laugh. It was the kind of laugh that made Claire think of horror films. "Thank you, counselor. Talk soon." Claire heard the phone click and focused on the books. When Thomas appeared in the library doorway, she pretended to be completely absorbed. "Claire, right." She turned, trying to seem calm. "Yes, Mr. Thomas." "How long have you worked here?" 2 months, sir." He came closer, noting everything around him as if cataloguing each object, each detail. "Did you know my father?" "Very little, sir. He traveled a lot for work." "He did." Thomas plucked a book and flipped it idly. "My father was always demanding, especially with me." Claire didn't know what to say, so she kept quiet. You know, Claire, my brother was always the favorite. Since we were kids, Alexander this, Alexander that. Why can't you be more like your older brother? He shut the book hard, making Claire jump. Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It's just, with my father's death, all those memories rushed back. I'm sorry for your loss, sir. Thank you. He slid the book back. But you know what? Maybe it's time things changed around here. Maybe it's my turn to shine. The way he said it made Claire's stomach drop. He headed for the door, then paused. Claire, you're a smart girl. I'm sure you'll know how to adapt when things change around here. He left, and Claire stood in the library with a terrible feeling. She'd worked in several homes. She knew the difference between competitive siblings and something darker. What she had just seen in Thomas's eyes went far beyond ordinary jealousy. It was hatred, toward his brother, toward his father, toward a lifetime in the shadows. Claire hurried to finish the library. She wanted out, fast, but she couldn't get Thomas's question to the lawyer out of her head. If my brother can't be present, why would someone ask that, unless they were planning something terrible? 4 days to the signing of the documents, Claire saw Isabel Beaumont head to Thomas's room with an expression she'd never seen. Less arrogance, more calculation. Claire was cleaning the second-floor hallway when she heard the door close and voices begin. She should have left, but urgency pinned her in place. The library was next to Thomas's bedroom, and the wall between them was thin. Claire went into the library and pretended to arrange books near the wall. Thomas, we need to talk. About what, Mother? The future of this family, and what we're going to do when your brother takes control. Claire pressed closer. Her heart was pounding. Alexander always despised me, Isabel continued. He thinks I'm just a gold digger who married his father for money. Weren't you? That's not the point now. Irritation sharpened Isabel's voice. The point is, when he takes over, I lose everything I'm entitled to. He'll toss me out like useless trash. What do you want me to do? Claire heard footsteps and eased back. You know very well what I want. Isabel's voice dropped, more threatening. It worked last time, didn't it? No one suspected the brakes had been tampered with. Claire's blood went cold. Brakes? What brakes? Mother, watch what you say. Why? There's no one here, Isabel laughed softly. Your father's accident wasn't an accident, Thomas, and you know it. Claire covered her mouth to keep from crying out. They had killed Alexander's father. It was your idea from the start, Thomas said, and he didn't sound surprised. He knew. Of course it was. Your father was never going to give you the company. It was always Alexander, Alexander. But now, Isabel paused, now we finish what we started. Alexander signs the documents in 4 days. Exactly. If he dies before the signing, you inherit everything automatically as second in line. Claire's legs trembled. They were planning to kill Alexander too. How do you plan to do that? Thomas asked, as if discussing the weather. Leave that to me. I have medical contacts who can get certain substances that cause instant heart attacks. And when? In 2 days, the day before the signing. We'll make it look like stress, pressure, grief. A chair scraped. Claire backed away quickly. She had to get out before they found her. Perfect, Thomas said. I'll finally have what should have been mine. And I'll remain the lady of this house, Isabel finished. Claire left the library on shaky legs, head spinning. Murder. They'd killed Alexander's father and now planned to kill him. And she was the only person who knew. But who would believe a poor cleaner against a billionaire family? St. Vincent County Hospital looked even more depressing that afternoon. Claire walked the narrow corridors with a small bag of fruit she could barely afford. The smell of disinfectant mixed with sadness clung to the peeling walls. She found Grandma Margaret in a shared ward, one bed among 5 others. The 78-year-old was far too thin, white hair spread on a yellowed pillow. Bonjour, ma chérie, Margaret said weakly when she saw Claire. Hi, Grandma. How are you feeling? Margaret held her granddaughter's hand with fingers like dry twigs. Better now that you're here, but I'm worried about you, my dear. Me? Why? You seem different, sadder than usual. Claire tried to smile. She never could hide anything from her. It's work, Grandma. Sometimes it's hard. Beware of those who smile while you cry, Margaret said in French with her eyes closed. What does that mean? Be suspicious of people who grin while you're hurting. Margaret opened her eyes and looked straight at Claire. Is there anyone like that in your life? Claire thought of Isabel, Thomas, Camille. They all smiled while she suffered, but now it was more than that. Now she knew they were capable of far worse. Grandma, if you knew someone was going to do something terrible, but no one would believe you, what would you do? Margaret squeezed her hand. I'd do what's right, even if it cost me everything, because living with a clean conscience is worth more than living safely. What if it was dangerous? Then it would be even more important to do it. Her eyes shone. Courage isn't having no fear, dear. It's doing what's right even when you're afraid. Claire kissed her forehead and promised to return the next day. On the way home, she couldn't stop thinking about Margaret's words. Back at the mansion to grab her things, Claire saw Alexander in the garden, sitting alone on a bench, looking at a photo. Even from a distance, the sadness in his slumped shoulders was obvious. She almost went to him, almost said something, almost told him everything. But then she heard Isabel's heels on marble. Claire, what are you doing standing there? There's work to do. The moment shattered. Alexander put away the photo and went inside without looking back. And Claire realized that might have been her last chance to save him. In 2 days, if she did nothing, Alexander Beaumont would be dead. 2 days before the signing, Claire arrived early. She couldn't stop replaying the conversation she'd overheard. The word murder echoed in her head. She climbed to the second floor with her bucket and supplies. The hallway was quiet, but when she passed Thomas's office, the door was ajar. Voices murmured inside, Thomas and Isabel. Claire glanced around, no one in the hall. If she lingered pretending to wipe the trim next door, she could listen unseen. So it's decided, Isabel whispered. The morning after tomorrow in the garden, Thomas confirmed, just like he does every day. Claire crouched, pretending to clean the baseboard, focusing on every word. The dose must be exact, Isabel went on. Dr. Fisher explained everything. 15 minutes after ingestion, the heart stops. It'll look like stress, anxiety, the pressure of the inheritance. Claire's blood froze. They really were going to kill Alexander. And the croissant? Thomas asked. I'll prepare it in the kitchen before the cook arrives. She won't suspect a thing. Then we'll just let her deliver it to the garden. As always, through the crack, Claire saw them leaning over Thomas's desk, shuffling papers. She glimpsed charts and medical words, but one hit like a punch. Cardiotoxic. She didn't know exactly what it meant, but it sounded lethal. Thomas chuckled softly. Perfect. Alexander and his beloved French croissants. How ironic, right? All that matters is it will work, Isabel said. The day after tomorrow you sign as the new heir, and I keep my rights as widow. Claire rose slowly. Her legs shook so badly she could barely stand. She took the bucket and slipped away as quietly as possible. At the end of the hallway, she realized she'd been holding her breath. She rushed downstairs and locked herself in the ground floor bathroom, sitting on the closed lid, trying to process what she'd heard. They were going to kill Alexander the morning after tomorrow in the garden, with the croissant he ate every day. Claire knew his routine. Every day at 8 a.m., Alexander sat on the garden bench for breakfast. Always a French croissant, black coffee and orange juice. A ritual he'd kept since childhood, according to Mrs. Rose, and they would use it against him. She had to warn someone. But who? The police? What detective would believe a cleaner accusing a billionaire family of murder? Alexander, how could she reach him without raising suspicion? Claire looked at herself in the mirror, pale face, eyes raw from holding back tears. Think, Claire, think, she whispered. She remembered her grandmother's words. Do what's right, even if it costs everything. But would the truth from a cleaning girl weigh more than the lies of millionaires? In that house, even noble silence carried more weight than the honesty of the poor. She splashed cold water on her face and stepped out. She had 2 days to figure out how to save Alexander Beaumont's life. If she failed, she'd live with knowing she could have stopped a murder. The next morning, the eve of the attempt, Claire arrived earlier than ever. She had a plan. Not a good one, but the only one she'd pieced together after a sleepless night. She would watch the kitchen. If she caught Isabel preparing the croissant, maybe she could do something. Knock it over, ruin it, anything. She slipped in the back door and greeted Mrs. Rose, who was already making the family's breakfast. "Hi, Mrs. Rose. I'm a bit early. Can I help with anything?" The 50-year-old woman gave a tired smile. "Sure, honey. Arrange those plates while I handle the stove." Claire picked a spot where she could see the whole kitchen. She pretended to work, but watched every move. 15 minutes later, Isabel appeared in the doorway. Claire's stomach flipped. "Good morning, Rose. How's Alexander's breakfast?" "Morning, Mrs. Beaumont. Almost ready. The croissant is in the oven." "Great. I'll finish it for you. You can set the dining room." Mrs. Rose hesitated. "But Mrs. Beaumont, I know. But today I want to surprise Alexander, prepare his breakfast personally. He's so sad." The lie sounded convincing even to Claire. Mrs. Rose smiled and left. Claire kept arranging plates, eyes on Isabel. The woman looked around to make sure she was alone, then pulled a small glass vial from her purse, clear, scentless liquid, the poison. Isabel took the croissant from the oven and set it on a plate. Carefully, she made a small slit along the side and poured the vial's contents inside. She pinched the pastry shut and smoothed it, then arranged everything on the tray. Claire was sweating cold. It was real, happening right in front of her. "Claire," Isabel said suddenly. Claire nearly dropped the plate in her hands. "Oh, I was helping Mrs. Rose." Isabel approached, eyes icy as ever. "Did you see anything interesting in this kitchen?" "No, Mrs. Beaumont. Just arranging plates, like Mrs. Rose asked." "Excellent." Isabel smiled, but it never touched her eyes. "Because it would be very unfortunate if someone saw something they shouldn't." "Do you understand me?" Claire swallowed. "I do. Now get to work and forget you saw me here." Isabel left with the tray. Claire stared at the spot where the poisoned croissant had been. In 20 minutes, Alexander would sit in the garden, eat it, and die. She looked at the clock on the wall, 7:40, 20 minutes to save his life. But how? If she screamed, made a scene, they'd say she was crazy. If she tried to snatch it from his hand, they'd demand to know why. There was only one way. She had to get close and warn him directly, even if it cost her job, even if no one believed her, even if it cost her own life. Because some truths are worth more than safety. Claire hadn't slept a wink. She'd stared at the cracked ceiling of the boarding house, mind spinning. Every plan seemed impossible. Her roommates snored softly, but she couldn't relax. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Isabel pouring poison into the croissant. 3 a.m., 4, 5. She got up before the alarm, a cold shower to wake up. She put on her uniform carefully, like armor for war. On the bus, she rehearsed what she'd say. Simple. Approach Alexander in the garden and warn him about the croissant. The problem was how to do it without sounding insane. She couldn't say she heard Thomas and Isabel plotting. They'd deny everything and she'd lose her job. Worse, if they suspected she knew too much, she could be next. "Excuse me, Mr. Alexander, but I think the croissant is spoiled. Too weak." "Mr. Alexander, don't eat that croissant." "Something's wrong with it." No, he'd ask how she knew. Claire stepped off the bus without a perfect solution. But she knew one thing: she wouldn't let a man die in front of her. Even if he was rich and she was just a cleaner. Even if no one believed her word. She reached the mansion at 6:30, earlier than ever. Isabel wasn't even there yet. She slipped into the kitchen and greeted Mrs. Rose, already preparing breakfast. "Wow, Claire, you okay?" "Looks like you didn't sleep." "I'm fine, just worried about my grandmother." "Poor thing. How is she?" "Better, thanks for asking." Claire went to the garden, pretending she needed to water the plants early because it would be a hot day. She wanted to know the terrain. The bench where Alexander sat was beneath a tree facing the house. The little table where Mrs. Rose set the tray stood to his right. It was an open area. If she went there, everyone would see. Thomas, Isabel, the other staff. No way to be discreet. Unless... Claire looked around and spotted a small ornamental bed near the bench. If she pretended to water those flowers, she could stay close without seeming suspicious. Risky, but her only chance. 7:30. Alexander always came down at 8 sharp. Mrs. Rose placed the tray at 7:55. Claire fetched the watering can and returned to the garden. She chose a flower bed near the bench and watered slowly, stretching out the task. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure he'd hear it when he arrived. Any moment now, a man's life would rest in the hands of an invisible cleaning girl, and she would not fail. 7:55. Mrs. Rose appeared with the tray, setting it carefully on the little table. Coffee cup, juice glass, the plate with a golden croissant. The croissant of death. Claire kept watering, trying to seem natural. Her hands shook so badly she splashed water outside the pots. 8 o'clock sharp, she heard Alexander's footsteps on the porch. He came down in a white shirt and dark slacks, wearing the same sadness she'd seen on the day of the French phone call. Alexander approached the bench slowly, as if carrying the world's weight. Claire kept watering, watching from the corner of her eye. He sat and lifted the coffee, took a sip, sighed. Then he took the juice and drank a little. She knew the next step would be the croissant. She moved a bit closer, watering flowers 2 yards behind him. He didn't notice her. He was lost in thought. He reached for the plate. Claire's heart almost stopped. "Good morning, Alex." Thomas's voice came from the porch. Claire glanced up. He stood at the door, watching his brother. He didn't look accidental. "Morning," Alexander answered listlessly. "Sleep well?" "More or less." Thomas descended a few steps, positioning himself where he could see everything. He was there to ensure Alexander ate the croissant. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Thomas continued casually. "Perfect for breakfast in the garden." Alexander nodded and reached out again for the croissant. Claire couldn't wait any longer. She edged closer, watering a fern right behind the bench, within 18 inches. He picked up the croissant. "Excuse me, Mr. Alexander," Claire said softly, trying to sound natural. He turned to look at her for the first time, brown eyes, tired but kind. "Hi, you're the cleaner, right?" "Yes, sir." Claire, Good morning, Claire." He turned back to the croissant, lifting it toward his mouth. Claire glanced quickly at Thomas, still watching from the steps. She had to warn Alexander without Thomas hearing or understanding. Only one way. "Mr. Alexander," she whispered in French, barely moving her lips, while she adjusted leaves. "Don't eat that." "It's poisoned." Alexander went rigid. The croissant froze midway to his mouth. He stared at Claire, eyes wide. "What did you say?" he asked in a low voice in French. "It's poisoned," she repeated, still whispering. "I heard them talking." Alexander looked at the croissant in his hand, then at Thomas on the steps, then back at Claire. From the porch, Thomas called, "Alex, you okay?" "You look weird all of a sudden," and started down toward the garden. Alexander looked at Claire, then the croissant, then Thomas coming closer. For a second that felt like forever, she saw his mind racing. "Hey, what's wrong?" Thomas reached the bench, feigning concern. "You went pale." Alexander didn't answer right away. He kept staring at the croissant as if it were a bomb. "I don't feel so good," he said slowly. Must be stress." "Have you been eating?" "Your breakfast is getting cold. Go on, eat the croissant." Claire kept watering, heart pounding. "Yeah, I think I will," Alexander said, but didn't move to take a bite. Thomas stepped closer. "Come on, man. You need to eat, especially with the signing tomorrow." It was subtle pressure, but Claire heard the insistence. Alexander raised the croissant again, this time looking directly at Claire. She made the slightest shake of her head. "No." "You know what, Thomas?" Alexander said suddenly. "I'll save the croissant for later. I'm a little nauseous." "Nauseous?" Thomas tensed. "From what?" "Not sure. Maybe anxiety, the responsibility." Alexander wrapped the croissant in a cloth napkin and slid it into his pocket. Claire almost sighed with relief. "Man, you have to eat," Thomas insisted. "You can't skip meals." "I'll eat later." "I'm going up to shower." Alexander stood and walked toward the house. Thomas remained with a strange look on his face. "Alex," he called. "What?" "You sure you're okay?" Alexander turned. "Why ask?" "I don't know. You looked like someone told you something upsetting." Claire's blood froze. Thomas was suspicious. "It was nothing," Alexander said. "I'm just tired." He went inside. Thomas lingered for long seconds, looking around. His gaze passed over Claire, who kept tending the plants. After what felt like an eternity, he went in too. Claire set down the watering can and leaned against the tree, shaking. She'd done it. Alexander hadn't eaten the croissant. He was alive. But now what? She knew Thomas would suspect someone had warned him, and it wouldn't be hard to figure out who. She had to leave. Fast, she stowed the can and slipped in through the back. She needed her things, and to go before they realized she knew. But in the kitchen, Mrs. Rose waited with a worried look. "Claire, someone's looking for you," she whispered. "Who?" "Mrs. Isabel. She's asking where you were, what you were doing in the garden. She seems nervous." The floor dropped from under Claire. "Where is she now?" "In Thomas's office." "They're talking upstairs." Claire eyed the back door. She could still run, grab her bag, and flee before they came down. But if she ran, they'd know it was her, and they'd come after her. Worse, they'd try to kill Alexander again, some other way. Number. She couldn't run. She had to stay and pretend she knew nothing, even if that meant risking her life. The war had just begun. Claire went up to the second floor trying to look normal, but her legs shook so badly she had to steady herself on the wall. Mrs. Rose had said Isabel was looking for her. That couldn't be good. She started cleaning bedrooms, doing the usual work, ears pricked for any sound from Thomas's office. 15 minutes later, footsteps on the stairs, heavy, slow, unlike Alexander's usual pace. He appeared in the doorway of the room where she was working, but he seemed different. Face a little pale, hand lightly over his chest. "Excuse me," he said softly, glancing both ways down the hall. "Yes, Mr. Alexander?" When he was sure no one was near, he whispered quickly, "Merci." "You saved my life." Claire's heart raced. "You're welcome, sir. Now I'm going to save yours," he whispered. "Be careful today." Before she could ask what he meant, Alexander stepped away and suddenly shouted, "Help! I'm not feeling well." His voice echoed down the corridor. Claire dropped the rag and ran to him. "Sir, what's happening?" "Chest pain, dizziness." He answered loudly, but when his eyes met hers, he blinked fast. It was an act. "Thomas! Isabel! Come quick!" Claire cried. Both arrived running. Thomas got there first, face arranged into concern that looked real. "What happened?" "Mr. Alexander felt sick," Claire said, feigning panic. Isabel appeared a moment later, and Claire caught a strange flash across her face. For a fraction of a second, disappointment. "We should take him to the hospital," Thomas said. "It must be stress from everything that happened." Alexander groaned softly, clutching his chest. "I think it was something I ate." I woke up feeling off. Claire saw Isabel's eyes widen for a moment. "Nonsense," Isabel said too quickly. "You didn't eat anything unusual." "Even so, we're going to the hospital," Thomas insisted, but there was something in his voice, relief. Better not risk it. 20 minutes later, Alexander was taken by ambulance. Thomas went in his car, saying he needed to be near his brother in such a difficult moment. But Claire had noticed the look the two shared when they thought no one was watching. It wasn't worry. Thomas believed the plan had somehow worked, that Alexander would die in the hospital, away from home, without raising suspicion. They had no idea they were being played. And for the first time since it all began, Claire felt a flicker of hope. Alexander was alive. He was okay. And he had a plan. Now she just had to survive long enough to see justice done. At St. Luke's Private Medical Center, Alexander went straight to a private room. The attending physician was Dr. Scott, a man who had looked after the family for 15 years. "Alexander, you scared me," Dr. Scott said once they were alone. "But your vitals look fine." "Doctor, it was just an anxiety attack. But I need your help with something very serious." The doctor frowned. "What kind of help?" Alexander pulled a croissant wrapped in a napkin from his pocket. "I need you to order a quick test on this. I suspect poison." "Poison?" Dr. Scott took the bundle carefully. "Alexander, are you serious?" "Very." He took a breath. "And doctor, officially I'm admitted in critical condition. No visitors. No one can know I'm okay." "Why?" "Because someone in my family tried to kill me this morning." Dr. Scott went silent for a few seconds, processing. Alexander could see the internal struggle on his face. "You're asking me to lie to your family?" "They tried to kill me, doctor." "Please," Dr. Scott's expression changed completely. "My God, are you sure?" "I am." "Please, can you help me?" "Of course. I'll order a preliminary test right now and tell the staff you're critical and can't have visitors." "Thank you." And I need one more thing. Go ahead. Alexander picked up his phone. I need to call a private detective. If anything happens to me, I want you to deliver all the evidence to the police. An hour later, Dr. Scott returned with a grim face. Alexander, the preliminary test confirmed cyanide at a dose that would have been lethal. Alexander closed his eyes and sank back on the pillow. So it's true. Who did this to you? I'm not entirely sure yet, but I'll find out. Alexander sat up. Doctor, may I use your phone? I need to call someone. Of course. Alexander dialed a number he knew by heart. Detective Carter, this is Alexander Beaumont. I need to talk to you about an attempted murder. No, I can't speak over the phone. Can you come to St. Luke's, room 42? Yes, it's urgent. While he waited, he thought of the cleaning woman who had saved his life, Claire. A simple woman who earned little, lived in a boarding house, but had risked everything for him. Now he needed to do the same for her. Detective Carter arrived 40 minutes later, a seasoned 50-year-old with the face of someone who'd seen a lot. Alexander, what is this about an attempt on your life? Sit, detective. It's a long story. Alexander told him everything, from his father's suspicious death to the whispered French warning in the garden. The detective listened in silence, taking notes. And you're sure the cleaner was telling the truth? I'm sure. The test confirmed the croissant was poisoned, and you suspect your brother and Isabel. They're the only ones who benefit from your death. Detective Carter shut his notebook. Then we're going to nail them. Back at the mansion, Thomas returned from the hospital with an expression Claire couldn't read. Tense but hopeful. Isabel waited in the living room. How is he? She asked as soon as Thomas entered. Bad, very bad. The doctors said his condition is critical. Claire was dusting a vase in the next room, but she could hear everything. Critical how? Isabel pressed. Cardiac issues. Serious. It could be the effect of… Thomas stopped mid-sentence and looked around. Let's discuss this in the office. They went upstairs, and this time they closed the door carefully. Claire kept working, thinking. Something didn't add up. If Alexander was truly ill, the poison had worked. But he hadn't eaten the croissant. She'd seen him pocket it. 2 hours later, Thomas came down alone and went straight to the kitchen where Claire was helping Mrs. Rose with lunch. Claire, he called. She turned, trying to seem calm. Yes, Mr. Thomas? You were in the garden this morning, right? Yes, sir, watering the plants. See anything strange? Claire pretended to think. Strange how? I don't know. Alexander acting different? Anyone approaching him? No, sir. He just had breakfast like always. Thomas stepped closer. You're sure? Because he said he felt sick right after breakfast. I didn't notice anything different, Mr. Thomas. Interesting. He stared at her for a few seconds, as if trying to read her thoughts. You know lying can get you fired, right? I'm not lying, sir. I hope not. He backed away. Because if I find out someone in this house did something that harmed my brother… He didn't finish, but the threat was unmistakable. When he left, Mrs. Rose approached Claire. How strange, she whispered. Why is he asking all that? I don't know, Mrs. Rose. Maybe he thinks something's wrong. Very strange indeed. In the afternoon, Isabel came to speak to her. But this time it was different, more direct, more dangerous. Claire, I need to talk to you. Yes, Mrs. Beaumont. You're a smart girl, and smart people know when to keep quiet about certain things. A chill ran up Claire's spine. I don't understand, Mrs. Beaumont. Of course you do. Isabel stepped so close, Claire could feel her breath. People who are too curious sometimes find themselves in serious trouble. Do you understand me? I do. Excellent. Oh, and Claire? Isabel smiled, but it was glacial. It would be a shame if your grandmother had a setback at the hospital. These things happen, don't they? Especially when treatments get interrupted. The threat was clear as glass. Claire's blood froze. My grandmother has nothing to do with this. Of course not. As long as you're an exemplary employee and keep your mouth shut about everything. Isabel walked away, leaving Claire trembling. Now she was certain. They knew she knew, and they were using her grandmother to pressure her. Claire checked the clock. 6 p.m. Visiting hours at the hospital started at 7. She needed to see her grandmother, make sure she was okay, and decide what to do next. Because one thing was clear, the war had officially begun. Claire reached St. Vincent County Hospital at a run. Her heart had been pounding since she left the mansion. Isabel's words echoed, "It would be a shame if your grandmother had a setback." She ran up the stairs, no time to wait for the elevator. In Grandma's room, relief flooded her when she saw Margaret awake and talking with a nurse. "Hi, Grandma," she said, trying to hide her anxiety. "My dear, what a good surprise." Margaret smiled, then frowned. "You're pale. Did something happen?" Claire looked at the nurse filling out the chart. "May I have a few minutes alone with my grandmother?" "Of course, sweetie. Call if you need anything." When they were alone, Claire sat on the bed's edge and held her hand. "Grandma, are you feeling okay? No one messed with your meds. No strangers came in." Margaret studied her. "Claire, what kind of question is that? Is something going on I should know about?" Claire breathed deep. She couldn't tell everything, but she needed to warn her about danger. "It's just, there are some strange people at work. I wanted to make sure you're safe. Sit, my dear. Tell me what's really happening." Before Claire could answer, a familiar voice came from behind. "What a coincidence to find you here." She turned. Thomas stood in the doorway, dark suit and a smile that never reached his eyes. "Mr. Thomas, what are you doing here?" "Checking out how treatment works in public hospitals." "Just curious." He walked in uninvited. "And you, visiting family?" "My grandmother," Claire said, trying to keep her voice steady. Thomas looked at Margaret in the bed, then back at Claire. "How sweet. Family sticking together." He approached the bed. "Hello, Mom. How are you feeling?" Margaret eyed him with immediate suspicion. "Fine, thank you." "Good. Health is such a fragile thing, isn't it? You never know when it can suddenly get worse." Claire's blood turned to ice, a naked threat. "Grandma, this is Thomas, my employer's son." "Ah," Margaret said, but her look said she liked nothing about what she saw. "Well, Claire," Thomas said, turning toward the door, "you'd better get home soon. Tomorrow's important. Important how?" "You'll see." He paused. "Oh, and Claire, take good care of your grandmother. You never know what can happen to elderly people in public hospitals." He left them alone. "That man is dangerous," Margaret said as soon as he was gone. "Why do you think that?" "His eyes, dear. I saw eyes like that in France during the war, eyes without scruples." Claire squeezed her hand. "Grandma, if anything happens to me, you must leave here. Go to Aunt Mary's in the countryside." "You're scaring me." "Promise me, Grandma." "If I don't show up tomorrow night, go." Margaret searched her eyes for a long time. "I promise." "But you promise to be careful." "I promise." Claire kissed her forehead and left with her heart tight. War had been declared, and she was in the middle of the battlefield. Near midnight, Alexander slipped out of the hospital through the back door. Dr. Scott had procured regular clothes and temporarily turned off the room monitor. "Are you sure you want to do this?" the doctor asked. "It's dangerous." "I need concrete proof," Alexander said. "The only way is to catch them talking." Detective Carter waited in an unmarked car outside. "Everything ready?" he asked as Alexander got in. "Everything." "Did you bring the equipment?" The detective held up a small backpack. "Top-tier microphones. They'll record everything crystal clear." They drove to the mansion in silence. Alexander knew every inch of that house. He knew Thomas always left an office window cracked for fresh air and that Isabel took sleeping pills every night. "I'll go in through the service door," Alexander said. "I have the keys." "You keep watch here. Careful, Alexander. If they catch you, they won't." He moved like a ghost, up to the second floor, avoiding the steps that creaked. He'd grown up in this house. He knew every sound, every shadow. Thomas's office was dark. Alexander didn't turn on the light. With his phone's flashlight, he hid microphones, one behind the bookcase, another under the desk, a third behind a framed picture. When he finished, he decided to install one more in Isabel's bedroom. Risky, but if they discussed the plan, he wanted to be sure it would be recorded. He went downstairs to the first floor and toward Isabel's room. The door was closed, but he could hear her faint snore. The pills had worked. He eased the door open and slipped inside, placing one mic behind the vanity and another near the window. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. Alexander hid behind the curtain, holding his breath. The steps stopped at the bedroom door. It was Thomas. "Mum," he whispered. Isabel didn't answer. She kept snoring. Thomas entered and went to the bed. "Mum," he whispered, shaking her shoulder. She startled awake. "What? What time is it?" 1 a.m. I can't sleep. We need to talk now. Thomas, I took a sleeping pill. It's about Alexander, and about the cleaner. Alexander tensed. They were going to talk about Claire. Isabel sat up, more awake. What about the cleaner? She knows something. I'm sure. How can you be sure? Thomas sat in the chair by the bed. Because she was in the garden this morning, very close to Alexander. And right after, he started acting strange. What kind of strange? He didn't eat the croissant. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Isabel went silent for a few seconds. You think she heard us talking? I do. And if she heard us, she warned Alexander. But if she warned him, why hasn't he turned us in? Maybe because he has no proof, or he's waiting for the right moment. Behind the curtain, Alexander prayed the mics were catching every word. What do you want to do? Isabel asked. First, deal with the cleaner. She can't go around repeating what she heard, and how do we deal with her? Thomas fell silent a long time. When he spoke, his voice was ice. The same way we dealt with my father. Alexander's blood ran cold. They were going to kill Claire. And Alexander, Isabel asked. We'll have to try again, another way. Alexander didn't wait to hear the rest. He had to get out before they discovered him. He slipped from the room and down to the ground floor. Near the service door, he heard a noise in the kitchen. Someone was awake. He hid behind the pantry door and waited. Footsteps came from the kitchen toward the service area. It was Mrs. Rose. Robe and slippers, carrying a glass of water. What are you doing here? She whispered when she saw him. Mrs. Rose, you scared me. I scared you? You're the one creeping around. Aren't you supposed to be in the hospital? He checked the hall. No one else. Mrs. Rose, can I trust you? Of course, boy. I've watched you since you were little. Then I need you to listen carefully and tell no one you saw me. She frowned. Is something wrong? A lot. And you might be in danger too. He quickly told her about the poisoned croissant, about discovering Thomas and Isabel had killed his father, and about the danger Claire was in. Mrs. Rose went pale. Good Lord, Thomas and Mrs. Isabel did that. They did. And now they want to kill Claire because she knows the truth. That girl, she saved your life. She did. Now I need to save hers. Mrs. Rose was quiet a few seconds, absorbing it, then sighed deeply. I suspected something was wrong. Thomas changed after his father died. Got different. What do you want me to do? Tomorrow morning, if they ask about me, say you haven't seen me, and keep an eye on Claire. If they try anything, I'll protect her. All right. Alexander hugged the woman who'd been like a second mother. Thank you, Mrs. Rose. You've always been true family. He left and returned to the car where Detective Carter waited. Did you install everything? Yes, and I heard a conversation you won't like. Alexander explained what he'd heard. They're going to try to kill the cleaner. Then we protect her, the detective said. How do we do that without revealing your fine? Alexander thought a moment. I have an idea, but it's risky. The next day, the day of the signing, Claire reached the mansion earlier than usual. She'd spent the night thinking about Thomas's threat and Isabel's cruel smile. Mrs. Rose was in the kitchen making breakfast. When she saw Claire, she motioned her over. Claire, sweetie, I need to tell you something. What is it, Mrs. Rose? The woman looked around and whispered, This family isn't what it seems. You need to be very careful. Why are you saying that? Because I know you're a good girl, and good people don't deserve to be hurt. Before Claire could ask more, Thomas appeared in the kitchen. Good morning, ladies. Good morning, Mr. Thomas, they answered. How's my brother in the hospital? When I spoke to them last night, they said his condition remains critical, Thomas lied. We may have to make some difficult decisions soon. A chill ran through Claire. Something about the way he said it didn't sound right. Oh, and Claire, Thomas continued, there's an important meeting here this afternoon with attorneys and family about the company's future. Understood, sir. You'll need to stay late to clean after the meeting. "Of course," she said with a polite smile, but inside something screamed it was a trap. When Thomas left, Mrs. Rose leaned in. "Don't be alone with them today. Promise me." Claire looked into her eyes and saw real fear. "I promise." But she knew the final battle was coming, and there'd be no way to run. 2 p.m. Claire was cleaning the living room as cars arrived. Lawyers, company executives, even a few reporters hovered outside. Mrs. Rose came over. "What's all this movement?" "Mr. Thomas said there'd be an important meeting about the company." "Strange he didn't ask for coffee and pastries," Mrs. Rose murmured. "He always wants to impress for big meetings." Thomas entered wearing a perfect black suit. He looked different, more confident, more powerful. "Claire, please clean the second-floor bedrooms. The meeting is downstairs." "Of course, Mr. Thomas." She climbed the stairs with the bucket, but stopped halfway when she heard voices in the main office. At least 10 people. "Gentlemen," Thomas's voice carried through the house. "Thank you for coming." "I know this is a difficult time for all of us." Claire hid in the hallway, listening. "As you know, my brother Alexander is hospitalized in critical condition. The doctors don't have much hope." A murmur of pity ran through the room. "Therefore," Thomas continued, "as second in line and under my father's will, I'm here to assume official control of the Beaumont Group." "Thomas," an older man's voice interrupted, "are you sure this is the time?" "Alexander is still alive. Dr. Matthews, you explained to me yourself that if my brother cannot perform his duties, I assume automatically, and he clearly cannot." Claire's stomach turned. It was all a lie. Alexander was fine. She'd seen him fake the sickness. "Very well," another voice said. "Let's proceed to the documents." At that moment, Claire heard noise outside, many cars and sirens. Thomas heard it too. The tension shifted. "What's that?" someone asked. "Must be the press," Thomas said, but his voice wasn't so confident. The doorbell rang once, twice, 3 times. "I'll get it," Isabel shouted from downstairs. Footsteps, the door opening, and then a strange silence. "Police. We have a search and seizure warrant." Claire's heart leapt into her throat. "Police. What is this?" Thomas's voice now clearly nervous. "You can't interrupt a business meeting." "We can, sir. We have a court order from Judge Caroline Andrews." Claire moved down a few steps to see better. The house was full of officers, and in the middle stood Alexander, alive, well, wearing a grey suit and an expression she'd never seen. Pure fury. "Hi, Thomas," Alexander said, stepping into the main room, "surprised to see me." The silence that followed was deafening. "Alex," Thomas stammered. "Man, what a scare. I thought you were in the hospital." "I was. But I decided to step out for a little family meeting." Alexander looked around at the attorneys and executives. "Gentlemen, I'm sorry to inform you that today's ceremony is cancelled, for reasons you'll understand in a few minutes." "Alexander, what are you talking about?" Isabel appeared at the doorway, trying to look innocent. "I'm talking about attempted murder of my father and of me." The room erupted, attorneys glancing at each other, executives whispering. "You've lost your mind," Thomas tried to laugh, but it came out forced. "What is this story?" Alexander signaled to Detective Carter, who brought in a portable speaker. "I thought you'd enjoy hearing a very interesting conversation recorded last night." The detective worked with the district attorney's office and obtained a judge's order. Based on this evidence, he pressed play. Thomas's voice filled the room. "First, we deal with the cleaner. She can't go around saying what she heard Isabel's voice. And how will we deal with her?" Thomas again. "The same way we dealt with my father." The room fell still. All eyes turned to Thomas and Isabel. Alexander looked straight at his brother. "And the person who warned me about the poison was someone brave. Someone who risked everything to save my life." He looked up the stairs, right where Claire stood. "Claire, could you come down, please?" Claire descended on trembling legs. Every eye in the room was on her. High-priced attorneys, important executives, police, and her in a cleaner's uniform, holding a rag. "This is Claire Moore," Alexander said to the room. "The woman who saved my life." Thomas tried one last blow. "Alex, you're trusting a maid? She could have made up anything made up." Alexander laughed bitterly. "How would she invent this?" He nodded to the detective, who produced a sealed bag with a croissant inside. The full analysis confirmed what the preliminary test showed: cyanide in a lethal dose. If I'd eaten it, I'd have been dead in 15 minutes. Alexander, this is a very serious accusation, Dr. Matthews said, stepping forward. I know. That's why I brought more. Alexander hit play again. This time it was Isabel's voice. It worked last time, didn't it? No one suspected the brakes were tampered with. And Thomas's voice. My father's accident wasn't an accident. It was the first step of our plan. Dr. Matthews stood immediately. Gentlemen, we must suspend this meeting until we clarify the legal situation. The other attorneys and executives drifted away from Thomas and Isabel as if they were contagious. You don't understand, Isabel sputtered. Alexander always despised me. He was going to leave me with nothing, so you decided to kill me, Alexander said coldly, just like you did my father. Detective Carter stepped forward. Thomas Beaumont and Isabel Beaumont, you are under arrest for homicide and attempted homicide, pursuant to the order issued by Judge Caroline Andrews based on the material evidence presented. This is a mistake, Thomas shouted. You can't prove anything. We can, the detective replied. We have the recordings, the analyzed poison, and a witness who heard you planning everything. Thomas looked at Claire with pure hatred. You wretch, you ruined everything. Before anyone could react, Thomas lunged at Claire. Alexander moved faster, stepping between them and grabbing his brother. Enough, Thomas. It's over. Officers cuffed Thomas, who raved. It was my right. It was always my right. I deserved that company. Isabel tried one last card. I did what any mother would do. I protected my son. Protected? Alexander looked at her with disgust. You killed my father. The man who gave you a life of luxury, the man who raised Thomas as his son. He didn't value Thomas because Thomas never showed he deserved it. At that moment, Dr. Matthews stepped closer to Alexander. About the woman who was engaged to you, Camille. She didn't come today. And she won't, Alexander said curtly. I ended it 2 weeks ago when I realized she only wanted my money. Thomas and Isabel were led to the squad cars. Through the window, Claire watched Thomas get pushed into the police car, looking like a man who'd lost everything. And he had. Alexander turned to Claire, who was still in shock. Merci, brave one, he said softly. You saved me twice. Twice. Once in the garden, and again by reminding me there are good people in the world. The room was nearly empty now. The attorneys and executives had left, promising to reschedule a real meeting, with Alexander in charge. Only Alexander, Claire, Mrs. Rose, and Dr. Matthews remained. Claire, Dr. Matthews said, approaching her, do you realize what you've done? You saved a man's life and unmasked 2 killers. Claire was still processing. I just did what I thought was right. And it was very brave, Alexander said, especially considering they threatened you and your grandmother. Mrs. Rose, silent until then, hugged Claire. I always knew you were special, girl, but I didn't know you were a heroine. I'm no heroine, Mrs. Rose. I'm just a cleaner. No, Alexander said firmly, you're not just anything. You're Claire Moore, the bravest woman I've ever met. Dr. Matthews adjusted his glasses. Alexander, about the company. The company will continue as my father wanted, Alexander said, but some things will change. He looked at Claire. Dr. Matthews, prepare an employment contract for Claire as my personal assistant. Claire's eyes widened. Mr. Alexander, I don't know if what? If you're capable? You just dismantled a murder conspiracy. I think you can handle a calendar and a few calls, but I'm just a cleaner. You were, Alexander corrected. Now you're much more. Mrs. Rose smiled. Take it, dear. You deserve it. And there's more, Alexander continued. Your grandmother will be transferred to the best private hospital in the city. Full treatment until she's well. I'll arrange everything today. Tears filled Claire's eyes. Mr. Alexander, I can't accept. You can. It's the least I can do for the person who saved my life. Dr. Matthews was jotting notes. What would her salary be? Alexander thought for a moment. $3,500 to start, with full health coverage for her and her grandmother. It's a special rate. She saved an empire. Claire nearly fainted. $3,500 was more than triple what she earned cleaning. That's a lot of money, Mr. Alexander. For you, it's still too little. She looked around the room, where an hour earlier 2 murderers were arrested, where her life had changed forever. One condition, she said. What is it? I want to keep speaking French with you. It's our special thing, Alexander smiled. The first true smile she'd seen on his face since they met. Bien sûr, Claire. Ce sera un plaisir. Dr. Matthews shook his head, chuckling. I've never seen a salary negotiation in French. I've also never seen a cleaner save $1 billion empire, Mrs. Rose added. Then we're all living firsts, Alexander said, and for the first time in a long time, Claire felt exactly where she was meant to be. A week later, Claire was visiting her grandmother in the new hospital. Margaret had been transferred to St. Luke's, the best in town. Alexander had expedited all the paperwork and gotten her a room the same day. The room was private, the machines modern, the nurses attentive, and the meds arrived on schedule. My dear, you seem different, Margaret said, holding her hand. Different how, Grandma? More confident, like you found who you really are. Claire smiled. I think I did. She told her everything, the attempted murder, her courage to warn Alexander, the arrests of Thomas and Isabel. My God, Margaret whispered, my granddaughter faced killers. I was scared, Grandma. So scared. Courage isn't having no fear, my dear. It's doing what's right even when you're afraid. I told you that, and I listened. That's why you're proud of me. Margaret was quiet a few minutes, then asked, And this Alexander, he a good man? Yes, Grandma. Very good, and handsome, Claire laughed. Grandma. What? I can't ask? You can. And yes, he's handsome, but that doesn't matter now. Of course it matters. You saved his life. He gave you a better job. You two speak French together. Doesn't it remind you of anything? Of what? Of the stories I told you when you were little, how I met your grandfather. Claire frowned. How? I was a nurse in a military hospital in France. Your grandfather was a wounded soldier. I cared for him. He fell in love with the woman who saved his life. 50 years of happy marriage. Grandma, this is completely different. Is it? Margaret smiled. Humble woman saves important man's life. He recognizes her worth. They discover they have much in common. What else do you need to know? That this isn't a fairy tale. It's real life. And who said real life can't have happy endings? Claire was about to answer when someone knocked. Come in, Margaret said. Alexander appeared with a bouquet. Good afternoon. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, Margaret said, winking at Claire. Come in. I want to know the man my granddaughter saved. Grandma. Claire flushed. Alexander laughed. Madame Margaret, it's a pleasure. Claire speaks of you often. I hope only good things. Only wonderful things. Margaret studied him for a few seconds. You have kind eyes, she said at last. I like men with kind eyes. Thank you, Ma'am. And do you treat my granddaughter well? I try to treat her as she deserves, which is very well indeed. Claire wanted to sink into the floor from embarrassment, and yet she was smiling. Her grandmother always knew how to make people feel special. A month later, Claire sat in her new office at Beaumont Group. It was small, but with a view of the city and a desk that was hers alone. It still felt like a dream. Alexander knocked. How are you settling in? Good. It's still strange to have a desk, a chair, a computer, all mine. You'll get used to it. He sat across from her. Claire, I need to tell you something. Thomas and Isabel confessed. Their lawyer advised a plea deal. Is that good? It means the process will be faster. They'll be convicted without a long, painful trial. Claire nodded. How long will they be in prison? Thomas will get 15 to 20 years, Isabel 12 to 15. They'll never bother anyone again, and the company. Running normally, actually better than before, without paranoia and toxic competition. Alexander was quiet a few seconds. Claire, can I ask something personal? Of course. Do you miss your old life, the simpler one? She thought a moment. I miss simplicity sometimes, but I don't miss waking every day, not knowing if I'd have money for Grandma's medicine. I understand. And do you miss him? Thomas? Alexander reflected. I miss the brother I thought he was. not the man he really was. I get that. But you know what? I learned true family is chosen, like Mrs. Rose, like your grandmother, like you. Claire's heart picked up a beat. Like me? You're the only person who met me at my worst and still believed I was worth saving. They looked at each other for a few seconds. It wasn't love at first sight. It was deeper, recognition. Two people who had walked through the same pain and found each other at the right time. Alexander, Claire said softly, thank you. For what? For giving me a chance, for believing in me, for treating me as an equal. Claire, you saved me twice. First in the garden when you stopped me from eating the croissant, and second when you showed me there are still good people in the world, that not everyone is driven by money or power. Well learned, my friend, Claire said. Well learned, he echoed, rising. When he left, Claire looked out the window. The city stretched below, full of possibility. She was no longer the invisible cleaner in a boarding house. She was Claire Moore, personal assistant, a woman with the courage to do what's right. And for the first time in her life, the future felt bright. Outside her door, Alexander smiled too. He'd lost a brother and an ex-fiancée, but gained something far more valuable. A true friend, and perhaps with time, something even more special. True love doesn't happen in fairy tales. It happens in real life between real people who choose to be brave when it matters. And this story was only just beginning. Did you like this story? Tell me in the comments. Claire got the ending she deserved. Until the next story. Thank you for listening.